Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Woodpeckers Deep Dive. My name is Jeff Ferris. Welcome to the backyard of Woodpeckers headquarters. Today, we're going to talk about pattern routing. Now, since we started the Ultra Shear line of router bits, we've introduced over a dozen different styles of pattern bits and flush trim bits. We have them in 1/2 inch shank, 1/4 inch shank, large diameter, small diameter, long cut length, short cut length, up cut, down cut, and compression. Then to add to the mix, we have a couple bits that just by looking at them, you can't tell the difference at all, but the price is $50 difference. What? I'm going to explain a bunch of these details and make it easier for you to find the bit that you need. But that's not all. I want to show you how pattern routing can fit into your shop. I'm going to show you how to make these Firepit chairs. I'll talk about making the pattern and then how to use the pattern. Then I'll show you how to make the process a little bit simpler with a couple of assembly jigs. Now, you may have seen chairs like this on other YouTube channels. Jay Bates has an excellent version of this chair and has ready-made patterns for sale. My problem with most of the other designs on the chair is that they're just too low for an older and less fit person to get in and out of gracefully. One of our product engineers, who happens to be an excellent woodworker, changed the angle and the length of the legs just a little bit to get the seat up to about 18 inches. He added a couple of other features to simplify assembly and the use of the chair. The design also adapts easily to a wide range of material thicknesses and species. Okay, that's enough talking about them. Let's rewind the clock a couple of days, head into the shop, and take a look at how I built these chairs and how you can put pattern routing to work in your shop on this project or any other one that you have in your head. Okay, let's get started. The first step in any pattern routing project is creating the pattern. I'm lucky enough to work in a place where CNC machining happens all day, every day. But I was an avid pattern router long before I worked here. Heck, I started pattern routing before CNCs were even a thing. If you don't have a CNC or a buddy with one, you can download a full-scale drawing of the legs and make your own patterns the old-fashioned way, with a bandsaw and careful work with sanders, scrapers, and files. If you do have access to a CNC, you can download the digital files. Both the PDF and the digital models are linked in the video description. Once you have the pattern, you need to machine the stock for your legs. Now you have some options here. My goal was to build a strong chair that looks substantial, but was as light as possible. And there's also a chance these might get left out in the rain from time to time. So I wanted something rot resistant. Two woods that are fairly common in Northeast Ohio match those goals of lightweight and rot resistance: sassafras and catalpa. My favorite lumber source didn't have any 6/4 sassafras, so I made the legs from catalpa and the slats from sassafras. They look very similar, so the blend is just great. In the South, you might opt for cypress. Aromatic cedar would work and is widely available. If you have to rely on a big box lumberyard, your two options are probably treated pine and western red cedar. The legs can be pretty much any thickness between 1 inch and 1.5 inches. I milled my 6/4 catalpa down to 1 3/8. The legs will cut out of a 5.5 inch wide board, but if you're lucky enough to find something around 8 inches wide, you can nest the legs together and save some stock. I marked the legs out on the stock and then rough cut them on the bandsaw. I like spec tape ST501 for pattern work. It's a paper tape, just a little bit thicker than masking tape. That gets the pattern and the stock as close together as possible. I'm pretty generous because I don't want the pattern moving at all. So before we set up the router table, you have a decision to make. If you're making the legs thicker, like I did, you may want your slats a little bit thicker too. On the other hand, if you're going for minimum weight and making your legs thinner, then you'll probably want your slats about 3/4 of an inch thick. All that determines what size bit you should use when cutting the pattern. If you're making your slats around 7/8 like I did, you'll want a 3/8 roundover on them, which means the starter hooks in the legs should be cut with a 3/4 inch diameter bit. But if you're making 3/4 inch slats, you'll want a 1/4 inch radius, so you should cut the legs with a 1/2 inch diameter bit. The pattern works perfectly either way. So, for my big chunky chairs, I'm using a 3/4 inch spiral compression pattern bit. But let's take a closer look at the specific bit I'm using. This is an Ultra Shear US 5275/20 PC. When this video was made, it sold for $129. Now this is an Ultra Shear US 5720 PC. At the time this video was made, it sold for $179.99. Can you tell the difference? Yeah, me neither. The difference is the $180 bit is solid carbide, and the $130 bit is made with a carbide sleeve brazed to a steel shank. The part that touches the wood is virtually identical. The solid carbide bit should have slightly better balance, given that it is one solid piece. If I were going into the business of making these chairs, I would consider the solid carbide, making a few for family members, and then whatever my next pattern routing project is going to be, I'm satisfied with the steel shank bits. And to be honest, I'm not really using the US 5275/20 PC either. I'm using its slightly shorter brother that's only 120 instead of 130. Same diameter, same everything, but a cut length of 1 5/8 instead of 2 inches, because that's all I need. All three of these are compression bits, which have an upcut section at the end and downcut on the rest of the cutting length. Since the bit is slicing toward the middle at both the top and bottom of the board, you get a clean cut on both sides. Now let's take just a minute to talk about pattern bits and flush trim bits. The difference is just the location of the bearing. A pattern bit has the bearing on the shank side of the cutter. A flush trim bit has the bearing at the end of the cutter. And then, of course, there's the combination pattern flush trim bit that has one on both sides. Here's a couple things to think about when deciding which way to go. If you're on a router table, using a pattern bit means the pattern will be on the bottom and your material will be on top. This can be an advantage if you're making more elaborate patterns that include clamps and hold downs. Another advantage to the pattern bit is they can also cut dados, grooves, and rabbets, so it can remain productive even when you're not pattern routing. Flush trim bits on a router table have the pattern on top. Some people feel more comfortable watching the bearing in relationship to the pattern instead of the cutter slicing into the wood. To me, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The combination pattern flush trim bit is a great choice because if you have stock that chips easily when cutting against the grain, you can flip your project over, adjust the depth of cut, and always work with the grain, whether the pattern is on top or bottom. Okay, time to get to it. The bit's installed, the depth of cut is adjusted, I've checked that the bearing is going to align to the pattern, I've got my safety glasses on and earbuds in. I'm going to ease into the cut, get the pattern against the bearing, and work all the way around the back leg. Now I'll do the seat leg. Next, I'm going to move the patterns to the second leg of each and repeat. The last piece to be cut to a pattern is the top slat for the chair back. Now I need 13 slats, 2.5 inches wide and 19 inches long. For the back, the slats overhang the legs by 3/4 of an inch on each side, and it's 11/16 to the center of the 1 3/8 inch leg. So the pilot holes for the screws are 1 7/16 from the ends and 5/8 from the edge. I'll drill 7 slats like this. The seat slats have a larger overhang. To calculate this, it starts with the 3/4 inch overhang on the back, plus the thickness of a leg, plus 11/16 to the center of the leg, and another 16th for clearance between the back and the seat when it's disassembled. That puts the screws 2 7/8 from the ends and 5/8 from the edge. I'll drill pilot holes in the 6 seat slats. Except, only drill 1 set of holes for the last slat. We'll drill the second set just before we install it. Now I'll head over to the router table and round over all the edges. Okay, if you're building one of these, or maybe 2, you can assemble it on a bench by just using a spacer block between the slats and measuring the space between the legs. That's how I assembled the first one. But it's a little fussy. If you're making multiples, I suggest taking the time to build a couple assembly jigs, one for the back and one for the seat. I started by laying out the patterns on a couple pieces of MDF and cutting out just the side that the slats attach to. Then I duplicated those and cut cross braces the correct length to get the legs the right distance apart. I taped the legs into these assembly jigs and positioned spacers at a few points that would support the legs in the jig. Then it's just rinse and repeat for the second side. On the back jig, I added a piece of 1/4 inch hardboard that gave me perfect spacing for the 3/4 inch overhang. On the seat jig, I needed another 1 7/16. Now I cut that from a scrap of 2x4 and then put the hardboard on the outside of that. Those end stops kept the ends of my slats perfectly aligned. I made a 1 inch spacer for the back slats and a 9/16 spacer for the seat slats. And I needed a couple 7.5 inch spacers to get the back started. With all my spacers, I was ready to assemble. I started with the back. I clamped the legs to the side of the assembly jig, making sure they registered on all the braces. The first slat goes against the raised feature in the legs. I checked it for square and screwed it in place. Then I put the 7.5 inch spacers on the leg to locate the next slat and screwed that one down. Then I placed the 1 inch spacer between that slat and the next one and continued that until it was time for the top piece. I put it in place and checked to see where the upper screw should be placed to keep it well inside the end of the leg to prevent a split. Then I laid everything out and drilled the pilot holes. When everything was done on the front side, I turned it over and installed the seat support on the back. Then it was rinse and repeat for the seat. I checked the screw spacing for the last slat before drilling the last 2 pilot holes and finishing it up. Assembling the chair when you get to the party is pretty simple. Just slide the seat into the back at the opening, push it all the way in until it hits, and set it down. When the party's over, pull the seat out, turn the back around and slip the seat inside the back, and away you go. Hey folks, thanks for watching this episode of Deep Dive. I hope you learned some things today about pattern routing, and I hope you like our fire pit chairs. If you did get something today, please be sure and give us a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, be sure and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you always know about every one of our great videos right when they're released. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time on Woodpeckers Deep Dive.